Good morning, everybody. Welcome back, Saturday Morning Sangha, Elm Community Insight on May 22nd of 2021. Again, my name is Joy Burns, and the title for my Dhamma talk today is Sila and What's Going On. We've spent the last few months, several months, working our way through the Eightfold Path. And then we were working on the Four Noble Truths. And here we are at the fourth Noble Truth, which is the Eightfold Path itself, the whole thing in one chunk. And we decided, Lee, Tracy and I, and Booker decided to break them up into buckets. And this first bucket in the month of May has been the bucket of Sila. Sila meaning right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And Sila is a Pali word, and there are several different interpretations of what it means. One is ethics and ethical behavior, and the other is morality. I spent the past week reading some old articles from Spirit Rock about the foundations of practice, and it was interviews with groups of Spirit Rock teachers. It will be, a link to the article will be in the next newsletter. I encourage you to read it. While all pieces of it did not make it into this talk, reading the article very much influenced this talk. And experiencing the 50th anniversary of the song What's Going On, which was yesterday, May 21st, greatly experienced this talk. When Marvin Gaye wrote this song, it was at a time of emotional turmoil for him. His partner, with whom he had sung many of his most famous duets, Tammy Terrell, had died in 1970. I think she died of like a brain hemorrhage or something. And he was bereft. And then his younger brother returned home from Vietnam, and he saw how deeply being in Vietnam had impacted his brother and how much it had changed him. And Martin Luther King had been assassinated in 1968. Bobby Kennedy in June of 1968. Kent State. So the National Guard shooting college students happened in 1970. And Jackson State had happened a couple of years before. And there were riots in the inner cities. I was 13, about to have my 14th birthday. The last 2 years, periodically I've said to Dave McCoy and to Lee Barbera, you know, does it feel like the 60s or 1970 yet? It's getting closer. And next week on May 25th, we recognize the first anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. So somehow that question, what's going on, has so much resonance even to today. A member of our Sangha lives in India, and many of us find ourselves praying for her and her family because of the devastation of the pandemic in India right now. Last week, I heard that the headquarters of the Associated Press was bombed by the Israelis, the headquarters that was in Gaza. And fortunately, they were notified, I think like 20 minutes beforehand, that they were about to be bombed. So the building was evacuated and no one was killed. What's going on? Takes me back to the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Can't get around it. It is so frequently present. And the second noble truth, the causes of suffering. When I asked myself about Sila and how does Sila and how do that question, what's going on, and Sila interact? From the song, what I heard is right speech is, come on, talk to me so you can see what's going on. Can we have a conversation? Can we interact? Can we meet and listen to each other instead of bombing each other, instead of shooting each other, harming each other? Lila Kate Wheeler wrote in the Foundations of Practice, Sila involves not policing oneself and others, but allowing open investigation and conversations about accountability with intent to deepen our wisdom and kindness. Let us invoke the generosity of being willing to make mistakes and learn from them. I hear the truth of suffering in these words from one of the songs on that album. War is hell. When will it end? When will people start getting together again? How do we work with these moral and ethical concepts? And how do we work with that question as we interact with others and as we meet all the political situations of today? One of the pieces of right action for me right now is all of the decisions about wearing a mask. In the state of Connecticut, where I live, all of the mask restrictions have been loosened. You still have to wear masks inside schools and airports and buses, and if you're in an Uber, if you're in a store or a restaurant or bar. But if you're vaccinated and have friends over for dinner and everybody's vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. For the first time this week, I walked around without a mask on outdoors when I was within 6 feet of other people. And it felt really strange. And I was sitting in my office with my colleague, and the two of us are both vaccinated. And I kept pulling my mask up and then pulling it down. And it was like I couldn't decide which I felt more comfortable with. It took me so long to get comfortable with the mask on. And now I'm feeling discomfort with the mask off. And that's a normal feeling to have to navigate. And even what's going on comes up with that too. What's going on? Why is this such a problem? I thought taking off a mask was going to be the easiest thing in the world. And even that's complicated. And we want to trust each other and believe that if you're not vaccinated, that you'll wear a mask. But we know that perhaps other people don't see it in this ethical or moral context of seeing the interconnectedness of our lives, and that kind of decision impacts other people in our family circles, in our sangha, in our workplace, in our places of worship, and just in the casual hangouts that we've missed for so long. Aaron Treat wrote, "To be alive and responsive, the practice of Sila and the exercise of power must be personal and relational. The pain and harm caused by abuse of power and transgression of Sila occur in relationship, not in isolation." And that may be the crux of Sila, is right speech, right action, right livelihood occur in relationship, in community, in our daily lives. They don't occur as much on the cushion as other parts of the Eightfold Path. To be engaged in Sila is to be in the thick of our lives and the messiness of being in community. Some people are vaccinated, some people aren't. Some people are going to wear masks, some people aren't. Some people are going to tell you they're vaccinated. Can you trust them to tell the truth? Some people are going to do things that are at risk, that are high risk. Are they going to tell you that they've done something that puts themselves and others at risk? When I live a moral and ethical life, when I live a life that is centered in right action and right speech, then if I make a transgression, as hard as it's going to be, my path is to be as honest with you as I can, so that the decision of whether or not you stand 6 feet away from me and wear a mask is yours. And I honor your right to make that decision. By the way, if anybody was wondering if this was the talk I wrote, this is not the talk that I wrote. So funny how that happens. Lila Kate Wheeler wrote in that Foundations of Practice, can I be humble enough to admit that I harbor harmful patterns? Can I be humble enough to admit that I harbor harmful patterns? Woo! What's going on? What is going on? And what's arising inside of us as we meet that vulnerability of needing that kind of level of honesty? Larry Yang wrote, to paraphrase one founding activist of our American Revolution, Thomas Paine, these are times that try our souls. I would add, these are times that challenge our secular and spiritual practice. Often, when we use the ubiquitous term mindfulness, there is a missing key component among its inherent characteristics. What is often not addressed is the aspect of mindfulness that we call integrity, morality, or ethical behavior. Without integrity, mindfulness is morally meaningless. Without integrity, metta is wishful thinking or a spiritual bypass. Both mindfulness and metta require the actions of conscience motivated by an ethical barometer. And so that question of what's going on throws down a relational challenge. Do I have within me what it takes to be honest when I commit harms against others? To hold myself accountable. And that's not easy. And when anything's relational, it's sticky and messy. As my friend David McCoy says, do I have the wisdom to embrace the suck? Martin Luther King said, we are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the way the universe is made. This is the way it is structured. So, dear ones, What does that question and invitation to be in relational dialogue? What does what's going on invite you to inquire about and to be in dialogue with others about? That is the essence of Sila, of right speech, right action, right livelihood. It is that relational construct and that working on it again and again. I mess up, I show up. I screw up, I'm accountable. Over and over again. What's going on?